I'm suddenly was in Zurich and now I'm not. I'm in London now. Happy to see you all.
Happy to see you too.
Yes. So how's it? I hope everybody's good. We're ready to continue our, what is it we're on about? We're
All about karma.
all about karma. Okay. I really hope you've read your course notes. Really hope you've read the course notes, because there's lots of information in there that I want, because I say things maybe in a different way. So then you have what I say, and then you have the course notes, you're going to get a good background. Okay. So I'm really hoping you've done that and had discussions about it. But the trouble is, I forgot what I talked about last week. I forgot what we discussed. I forgot what details. Anybody got Tari got a good sense of what I said, went through last week? Have you got?
I got to look at my notes. Sorry.
Good. Have a look at your notes. That's great.
Yeah.
What have you got?
Humans in each, not possible. Just a second. We started with karma is the natural law, but let's see where we ended. Lamram Junior School, no. We're the boss. We did the environments, tendencies, environment, karma runs out. Let's see. Miracle. A realm is a state of mind. Yeah, I have brief notes here, so.
Okay, that's okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Subtle light bodies on Earth, but now a degenerate time.
I think what I might have done is gone off a bit and talk about how there can be different realms and things. Maybe I talked about that. Do you remember last what I talked about? Did you take notes last? Remember?
You also
4 ways that karma can affect you.
Last, what have you got down there?
With the realms, the way we are being reborn, whether it's propelling karma or it's which type of rebirth we'll get and the types of rebirth.
Yeah, I think we get into that in kind of a sort of a general way, trying to get our heads around this very weird idea of reincarnation. It really is quite a shocking concept to us, especially the concept of reincarnating from a human to some other form. That's what's peculiar to us, Anyway, now I think I'm beginning to remember. Okay, so we just we do our refuge prayer, our motivation. We think that here we go. Okay, you're going to do the mantra, are you? Okay, you do the mantra. That's good. We think we offer this all the objects of the universe to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's really nice to do. Okay.
Jukshengleto Tramri Nidegyanpadi Sakye Jindu Meche Urwai Drogonanga Jingla Chepaso Jetsun Lama Yampa Kienam Kiche Kukala Kien Se Chutsi Jita Samhe Ujetin Mala Zagye Chuki Chapab Chusol Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niyatayami. And now, as usual, we remind ourselves of our refuge and remind ourselves of our motivation. Sangye. So first is English. I'll say a little bit extra words in English. So we're thinking until we are enlightened, no matter how long it takes, we are going to rely upon the Buddha, his teachings, and the community of practitioners. So then we're thinking that by the virtuous karmic seeds that we drop into our mind by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to benefit every single suffering sentient being. Thinking like that. And again, until I am enlightened, I will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly of the practitioners, our fellow practitioners. And by the virtuous karma that we create by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to benefit all suffering sentient beings. Sangye Cherang Soke Chognam La, Jancho Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chernyan Gipes Sonam Ki, Drola Penshir Sangye Drugpa Shog. Okay, so kind of like, I often, when I talk about karma, I try to, in the Lamrim, you just get all the facts, this, and sort of because, as I said, in Tibet, karma is just in the bones of the beings because it's been their view for 1200 years. And it came from India, where it was totally the view of the universe, for 1,000 years before that, 2,000 years before that. But for us, it's a totally new concept. Even if you're Christian, if you're Christian, there's some, in a sense, there's a concept of reincarnation, isn't there? Because you go to heaven or hell. That's like reincarnation. But the difference is you don't keep going. You've only got one life and then you go to hell or heaven forever. That's the option. Whereas the Buddhist one is this, these. And so the biggest difference is this continuity of consciousness, not a creator, not some starting point where someone made you, not like that. But there's a continuity of this consciousness, and that everything we think and do and say is the process that programs us. Basically, that's and why this is difficult is because we have this very, very, very powerful clinging to this absolute truth that our nature is me, human, Rabina, Australian, this, that. It's very, very, very concrete. There's no feeling in us, is there, that we're this kind of temporary shape and size and personality. There's a very absolute strong feeling of grasping, not just even as ourselves as definitely permanent, but there's an absoluteness about us, which is exactly the reason why when we hear that this mind in this human body, due to the way you program this mind, that mind can turn into, literally be reborn in the egg of an ant mummy. This just sounds, it's like a joke, It's like a joke in the West. And why is because we have a view. There is an ant, there is a dog, there is a human, and that shape and size is the absolute character of that person. So that's why even when people talk about, if they do talk about, say, going to heaven, for example, you go to heaven as the person that you are. Rabina is a human being, and the Rabina is in heaven as Rabina. You'll meet your mother in heaven, you'll meet your husband in heaven, that kind of thing. It's not like that for the Buddha, because the shape that we are is the fruit of past actions. So if I leave this life and take another life, the actions I do in this life will produce another shape. It's quite literally like that. So the key thing, and this is why the more we try to learn to understand emptiness, that there is no intrinsic set in stone self, Australian self, Danish self, American self, male self, female self, the more we get that idea that we're just this temporary shape and structure with certain tendencies, which are the fruits of past, and that what we do and say and think now produces another package, That's really, the more we understand emptiness, the more it helps us understand how we can change shapes and sizes and forms and personalities, Because we have this very distinct feeling, don't we, of there's an absolute self in there, and it's the shape and size of Rabina, That's how we feel. That's the depth of our grasping at ourself. We grasp at this shape, and we can see it in daily life. I am this kind of person. I am fat. I am ugly. I am this. I am that. We identify very strongly with what we see, And we do the same to other people. So this is the point the Buddha is making. Male, female, human, dog. They are a certain shape, the four elements coming together as a certain shape with a mind, with a bunch of tendencies. And then all of those, both the shape and the tendencies are literally the fruit of the seeds you've planted in that mind, of the programming in that mind. So we know in this world, we can go from being like, like one of my sisters was a chiropractor. That's how she defined herself. And then she suddenly became a lawyer. Completely different body of knowledge. We all know we can do that. You can turn into a complete different body of knowledge. You can learn a completely different language. You can learn completely new skills. We know that we can change who we are, you know. You can change your mind about things, learn new bits of knowledge. We also know if we try hard, we can definitely see that we can change angry habits into patient habits and mean habits into loving habits. We can see we can do that too. But there's still this sense of an absolute me with this shape and structure, you know. That's function of the root delusion. And then we see it as intrinsic, and then we see it as permanent, unchanging. But the Buddha says, no, there's nothing like that. Nothing like that. Everything is in a state of flux. Things change radically from second to second. And then the karmic one is this law, as Buddha has observed it, as natural law of what we ever think and do and say is the process that determines what we become in the future. And again, I always repeat this, and it's really true. We really understand this when it comes to intellectual knowledge, creativity. You begin not knowing one note of the piano, nothing about music. You go from total ignorance to total genius. So we know we can radically change our minds and transform our mind into a different shape. As Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like, you know. But we don't understand this when it comes to happiness and suffering or our personality. We think it's very fixed. Oh, I'm an angry type of person. I'm not a very intelligent person. I'm a depressed person. I mean, forget about the meaning of emptiness. Just look at the way we are very concrete about that. So there is anger there. There is depression there. There is love there, but we over-exaggerate its absoluteness, you know. And so we're sort of set in stone. It's a really good saying, is set in stone, you know. So the whole idea of karma, I mean, is again so radically different for us, and it really does need thinking about. We are the product. We are the result, not of some creator's job, not of your mother and father. Yes, they gave you the egg and the sperm and the brain and the DNA and all the rest. The physical body comes from your mummy and daddy. But the way that physical body manifests is really driven by the mind, you know, driven by the mind. And the mind does not come from mummy and daddy. I mean, I say this and it all sounds so weird. The more you use the Buddha's teachings as your basis for life, the more weird the idea that someone else can give you anger, give you intelligence, give you love. That's the view in neuroscience, and we say it's that way. So we're willing to think differently how we think it, you know, say the words differently. Because the whole point, of course, is the Buddha saying your mind's not physical. Your mind comes from your own continuity of mind. It's an unbroken river of mental moments. Each moment of this mind comes from a previous moment, which comes from a previous moment, which comes from a previous moment. And it's a good meditation to do. You literally logically go back second by second. You think this moment, and you get back to when you're 3 and 2 and 1, and you keep tracking back. This moment of mine comes from where? The previous moment. And that one comes from where? So it's an unbroken chain of mental moments. And then you get back to the first second of conception. So the question is, where was the mind the second before that? Well, it's got its own continuity. It's its own entity. That moment of mind in the sperm and the egg came from a previous moment of that continuity of mind. So you're kind of thinking like this, trying to get our head around it, you know. Yes, the egg came from mum. The sperm came from dad. No argument. But the consciousness goes back to previous moments of itself. That's the difference between the Christian view. I mean, the Christian view is that God puts the soul in there at that time, not the Buddha's view. So, okay, as we've been talking, you know, there are 4 ways our karma ripens. And my feeling is that we really get our head around this, just this basic
kind of way of talking. It's not complicated intellectually, but to remember it, once you get these four clear, you're able to interpret your own life. It's extremely helpful. So if you look at anyone's life, you can divide into four ways that you experience the life, four components, if you like. One is the body you get, the lion body, the human body. That's the first one. The second way your karma ripens is the tendencies in the mind that goes into that egg and sperm. The tendencies. A tendency is another word for a habit. Habit implies you've done it before. So straight away, it tells you the Buddha's you. If you come into this life programmed at the first second of conception with your own tendencies. See, that's the big difference with the neuroscientific view, the materialist view. We say those tendencies are contained in the genes and the DNA and whatever, and then they come from the physical. So the person is a product, quite literally, of mummy, daddy. And we look back into the past, indeed we do, but we look into the past of mummy and daddy and grandpa and grandma. But the Buddha's view is you look into the past, but the mind's past, the past of that mind. So one is the body, two is the mind, the tendencies in that mind, the personality traits, the goodness, the badness, the psychosis, the good at music, the good at math, the good at football, the tendencies in that mind. Personality. That is a product of that mind. And then it begins to grow as you get older. And yes, indeed, you're nourished and nurtured and conditioned by your parents, conditioned by the external world. Only condition, not the main thing. Like I always quote, my mother was a classical musician, and she could see that her little Bobsy was good at music, so she taught me music. So the usual way we say it is Rabina got music from her mother. No, my mother came into that life with the tendency to be good at music because she'd practiced it before. I came into this life with a tendency to be good at music or whatever. My mother said so, because I must have practiced it before. Then I was fortunate enough, due to karma, to have a mother who helped nourish my tendency. So it's the same with the negative qualities. Oh, Rabina got her anger from her father. No, she didn't. I had my own anger. I came into this life with my own anger. Then my father's behavior triggered my anger. That's the correct way to put it. That's why when we talk about it to ourselves and think about it, we should think these very specific ways, using these different words that help us put it precisely in position in our minds. We're trying to get used to this idea. So the first way our past actions ripen in the present is the type of body we get. And that's what they call a realm of existence, the human realm, animal realm, spirit realm, hell realm, God realm. There's different levels of minds, all in terms of levels of happiness and suffering. Because like we've been talking, there's, a way of describing the whole of the Buddha's path is in terms of getting rid of suffering and getting happiness. It almost sounds so cute in a way, but it's really quite fascinating, because if we analyze it, all we want is happiness at the most primordial level. You mightn't articulate it like that. We instinctively want things to be nice. That's why we adjust our body when it's uncomfortable. We turn the lights down when it's too hot, when it's too bright. We put a jacket on when it's too cold. All these automatic, primordial, instinctive things, wanting to be comfortable, which is attachment, which we want to be happy. And that's a simple set of happy. And then we don't want to be cold, miserable, painful body. So we adjust everything, continually driven by wanting pleasant feelings and trying to avoid unpleasant feelings. This is kind of really fundamental, isn't it? So the first way our past actions ripen is the type of body. The second way our actions ripen is the tendencies in that mind, in that body. Yes, triggered and trained
and nourished by the outside world, like your parents. But we can always see these big contradictions. You get psychopathic children born to nice mummies, you know. You get psychopathic mummies giving birth to nice children. It just doesn't add up for our mind. We're confused by that. We're just not quite sure what goes wrong, you know. It doesn't fit, in other words. Then the third way that our karma ripens is the way we are seen and treated by others. Because we are social beings. Look at us. We live in relation to others. Animals, the same. We're intensely social. We connect to others. And we can see, in a simple way of putting it, if you want to look at your life from the time you were born up to now, you could divide all your experiences in relation to others into precisely two categories. The beings who were kind and nice to you, and the beings who were ugly and mean to you. Yes, they change roles. And another way of putting that, you can divide all your experiences into happy experiences and unhappy experiences. It's kind of almost too simple, but we can see it's true. And the fourth way, which seems more abstract to us, that our past actions ripen in the present, is the way the actual physical world impacts upon us. That's literally called environmental karma. So this seems very abstract initially, but like I always like to explain, if we think of the Vajrayana model of the universe, which is actually more esoteric, but is very helpful. You know, the physical world, as far as this model is concerned, of course, this is very ancient, but we used to think this a few centuries ago in our culture. The physical world is made up of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. This still totally works for the Buddhist analysis, you know. And this is especially in the Vajrayana. We get far more teachings about this as we take our empowerments and start to do the practices. But the physical world is made of the four elements. And then the mind, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the mind, all minds in the universe are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. So in other words, the fundamental building blocks of the universe are minds and matter is made of the four elements. This is studied extensively and in depth in the Indian and the Buddhist literature, you know. And this, when we begin to understand this one, then we can then understand the impact or the relationship between mind and body. So we can see in daily life, you know, when you're angry, you can see that when a person's very angry, I mean, people who spend their lives being angry, their body sometimes have incredible illnesses. Their body is aching, their body is uncomfortable. I mean, thing we can see, even us, I mean, people talk about the relationship, I think, in the Western models, the relationship between health and the mind. That's absolutely, utterly, and completely the Buddhist view, which is the one based on in the Vajrayana one, and this is the Tibetan medical system, but at a much subtler level, much subtler. Because, like we've described, this is not in the teachings in karma in your book. This is from Vajrayana, but I find it very helpful. That we've got, you know, we've got gross consciousness. This is the death we learn when we learn the death process. Gross consciousness is our sensory consciousness. The capacity for the eye consciousness to cognize shape and color, because that's all this eye consciousness can cognize, combined in dependence upon a good working eyeball, you know. The capacity of the ear consciousness to hear sound in dependence upon a working body and the eardrum and the nerves all working properly. There's the relationship between the physical and the mental. It's pretty evident at that level. Then you've got the subtle consciousness, which is actually referring to our mental states, to our emotional states, to our thoughts. That technically is subtle in this model. And so this is where, you know, the Vajrayana model, that the body is made up of subtle mind and subtle body. And the subtle body, the gross body is this one we can see and touch. But the subtle physical energy we have, you know, is this subtle nervous system throughout our entire body, these 72,000 subtle channels, as they call it.
And then all our minds, and this is so different from the brain science, you know, all our states of mind are linked to those winds coursing throughout these channels in our body. So it's really extremely subtle. So as Lama Zopa says, just having the thought, an angry thought, it programs, my word, it programs your mind. And because your mind is linked to its own wind energies, which is your subtle physical body, and also anger is connected to its own winds. Attachment got the wind energy, love, kindness, all the states of mind are connected to their own winds. And the winds is the basis of Tibetan medical system. The Chinese one, the same. You study it for 10, 12 years, you know. The health is related to the balance of these wind energies at the subtle level. So the anger, you know, programs your mind with that tendency. And then that impacts and it pollutes the wind energies connected to the anger. And that eventually, karmically, organically, brings physical illness, the imbalance of the wind energies. So that can be in 10 years' time or in a future life. You know, you then get born with your wind energies all polluted because of your angry mind, which then causes you to get born in a sick body, to have sick body. Then not only that, but in turn impacting over a long, long time on the external elements. And then you'll get born in a place where the elements are unbalanced, bad weather, polluted water, terrible food, you know, or even like have eruptions and volcanoes and too much rain and too much fire. I mean, look at the world, look at the environmental imbalance of the elements. I mean, Australia, California, for example, either have burning hot fires or drought. You know, Australia has drought sometimes for years, and they have too much, then suddenly have too much water. The elements never behave harmoniously. That's the result of the karma, the negative karma of all the beings, including the kangaroos and the ants and the humans who live in that environment. In other words, there are 4 ways our karma ripens. If, for example, using one example of a positive action, non-killing, the tendency of non-killing in the mind, by living in vows of non-killing, that guarantees you will be reborn in a healthy body. A human body. Specifically, the main karma, the throwing karma, they call it, that's got the 4 conditions. There's a mouse. You intend not to kill it and you have compassion. You do the action of not killing and the mouse is still alive. That's a complete action of non-killing that programs your mind. And then at the time of your death, one of those karmic seeds, in our case, in our past life, was triggered and we found our way to our mother's present human womb. The direct result of strong non-killing. The second way non-killing will ripen is in the mind of a person as a tendency to not kill. Now we can see on this planet, as we've talked, most people kill because they've got the tendency to kill because they haven't purified it in a past life and they haven't lived in vows of non-killing. They've lived that, you know, so you get born with a tendency to kill. But if you've got a tendency to not kill, you can deduce that you have lived in vows of not killing in the past. Pretty amazing. The third way your non-killing will ripen, the third track of karma, if you like, is that you won't get killed. You won't die young. So dying young, look at the world. Human beings with a healthy, beautiful body due to non-killing, but they've got the residual karmic result left over from some lifetimes of killing because they haven't purified it, and they will die young. They will drop dead in their soup when they're 15, healthy and well, and they just die, or they'll have a car accident, or they will just be sick and there's no medical reason. We hear about this. Babies die, you know, 2-year-olds die, 15-year-olds die. We know this.
The main cause of this from the Buddhist perspective is your karmic petrol tank of non-killing ran out and you died. Or you get killed by someone else because you've killed them in the past. And like I always talk, look at all the fetuses. I think if you did your research, you're going to find more humans who get the karma, who have the karma to almost like win the lottery and get a human womb, die before they are even born than humans who get born. I wouldn't be surprised. Think about that. That's the experience similar to the cause of past killing. Then the fourth way our non-killing would ripen is that you'll be fat and healthy. You won't get sick. The food will nourish you. And you'll be like Warren Buffett, who's 90, this famous American rich fellow. I read his biography, and he's famous for lots of things, but he's famous for only ever eating all his life cheeseburgers, particular flavored Coca-Cola, and vanilla ice cream. That's his diet for maybe 85 years. And he's still alive, fat and healthy, age 90. That is the result for the Buddha of strong non-killing karma ripening as the environment impacting upon him well, you know. So there's 4 ways our karma, so we can understand these 4. You can divide them. It's clear in your life. You've got a body, you've got a mind, you have people who impact upon you, and you have a physical world that impacts upon you. It's not complicated. If you can get a sense of these 4 and then look how they ripen in your life, you'll be able to understand your karma, and you'll be able to live with it and understand it. Because the biggest trouble, for example, we assume if we're a nice person and don't lie, we just assume people must believe us. We assume if we're generous, people will be generous back to us. We assume that. This is one of the fundamental assumptions that causes us so much pain. We just don't understand why good things happen to bad people and why bad things happen to good people. We have this assumption. But from this Buddhist perspective, from the point of view of karma, there's no direct relationship. This is quite astonishing. Direct relationship between the tendencies in your mind and how you're seen and treated. When we can understand this, we'll at least have an explanation for why when you're telling a truth, someone doesn't believe you. Why when you're being kind, someone is mean to you. This is where we go crazy. But if we can understand these 2 tracks of karma, your own tendencies, and then how people respond to you. I mean, of course, it can be in general, we can see there's a relationship. If I smile at you, it's likely you'll smile back, but we can't guarantee that. We can see that. And that's where we get so much suffering if we try to, have attachment to having people love us. We spend all our lives trying to get people to like us, the boss to approve of us, our mother to, our sister to like us. And we can see how hard it is. And we go crazy. We can understand these are 2 separate tracks of karma. Then we can understand, we can interpret our lives, but we have to remember these 4. It's not just, oh, it's karma. It's too broad, you've got to be more precise. The other thing, they always, talk like this, but it's kind of, we're not used to this. But again, one of the fundamental laws, it's true. If you sow a seed in a ground, it will grow. You give it the right conditions, it will grow. This is the logic of growing of seeds. So the same, if you have created the causes, if you have done certain actions and sown seeds in your mind, they will ripen. So the reverse is, if a weed pops up in your ground, you can deduce with absolute certainty that a seed preceded it. With absolute certainty, the logic of botany is so clear. You would never say, how dare there be a weed in my garden? I do not deserve a weed. Who put a weed in my garden? By definition, if it's your garden, the seed was in your garden. So here the analogy is, if the karma ripens if someone punches you in the nose, if someone gives you $1 million. You must have sown the seed for that. In other words, quite literally, you know, even though we think when someone is nice to me, or if someone's mean to me, but I was just kind to them that moment, we say, how dare you do that? I don't deserve it. But if we have the bigger picture, then if you sowed a seed in the ground, you do deserve the weed. I mean, it's a heavy way to put it, but it's logical because it's logical. So if there's no money in the bank, well, you deserve no money in the bank because you've got to put money in the bank. If there is money in the bank, you deserve it because you put it there. If someone does love you and is kind to you and gives you $1 million, you by definition deserved it because you are the main cause from your past generosity for getting that $1 million. So if someone punches you, you do deserve it in the sense that you must have sown the seed. But the deserve is a very heavy word and we use it very heavily. But I'm just trying to show the logic of it. And what that brings is, instead of this outrage, how dare something bad happen to me? I don't deserve it. When you have the view of karma, and you really try to practice it every day, one of the real results from it is that you become kind of grown up. You stop freaking out so much. You don't get so angry. You're not so attached because you know why it's happening and you own responsibility for it because you are the gardener and your life is your garden. It's a great way to put it, I tell you, but it really takes time. But you've got to practice it every day, not just say, yeah, I believe in karma. That doesn't help. You've got to use it, squeeze your brain and think it through logically. And then you apply it when things happen. And slowly, like anything, you learn the theory and it becomes automatic. So then experientially, the difference is you become more emotionally stable. You take responsibility for what happens to you. You stop blaming other people. You stop getting angry. You stop being too attached. This is the logical consequence of using the view of karma as a way of interpreting our lives. It's profound, I tell you. So if the fruit comes, you sowed the seed. If you sow the seed, it will come, but you can pull it out. That's what purification is. That's why the purification practice is so unbelievably necessary. So that's why I constantly talk about karma, a natural law. It's like a broken record. And why we have to keep hearing that is because we are addicted to believing either God planned the universe or no one knows why. That's what we do say in the materialist world. We're so arrogant. We don't think there must be an answer that we don't know. We just assume, we say, oh, we haven't found the answers yet. Well, it's true, but Buddha's got a view. He's been having this view for quite a while. Christians have a view. Australian Aboriginals have a view. There are lots of views in the world. Maybe we should look into them and see, you know. So here we're looking into this view, this interpretation of why things happen. And all these things that happen, this is what's interesting, we're framing them in terms of there being happy things that happen or unhappy things that happen. Look at your life. It's a perfect way to put it. It sounds kind of simplistic, but analyze your life. It's very primordial, you know. So that means the logic of this law is suffering experiences moment by moment come from seeds of negativity planted in your mind on the basis of your having done an action based on a negative thought. And happy experiences come as a result of actions you've done in the past with your body or speech based upon a virtuous thought. It's almost absurdly simple, you know, but this is the Buddha's analysis. So it's like learning botany. You know what fruits you want in the future, and you know the weeds you don't want in the future. That determines what seeds you plant. That determines what gardening you do. This is why it's a brilliant example, a brilliant analogy. It's so simple, you know. So we know we don't want further suffering. If we take the view that my mind will continue, if we take the view that my mind will leave this body and take another body, we know perfectly well if that's true, I do not want suffering. It's something, and this is the first level, junior school level of applying karma. I absolutely know if I continue future lives, I do not want to be born as an ant, a dog, a leech, a rat, a pussycat, even a rich pussycat. No, thank you. I don't want to get born as a God realm being who's blissfully happy, but just uses up all their bliss and that all goes down the toilet and they end up in a lower realm because they haven't realized emptiness yet. And I don't want to be born in the spirit realm, freaking out with attachment. And I don't want to be born as a violently, intensely suffering being, oneness with fire and rage and despair and hideous experiences. I don't want that. So bare minimum, as long as I'm in samsara, I want another decent human rebirth. Except, of course, I want to go to Amitabha's Pure Land, which is another discussion. We talk about that in the death, the death teachings. So that's okay. I aspire to that. So these are clear in my mind. If I take this view, I want either one of those. Two options when I die: Amitabha's Pure Land or a nice, decent human mother and human father, hopefully with lots of money, so you can get a good education and a healthy body and nice tendencies and nice people and nice experiences and nice environment. Thank you very much. It's not complicated. I want that, please. Well, if I want that, I had better sow the seeds. I had better do some gardening. It's not a complicated concept, I tell you. It's just that we freak out, can't cope with it because we hear it as punishment and reward. We think there's somebody else up there pulling the strings, not for the Buddha. This is the way you try to internalize this approach, What's the way I'm trying to internalize it? So we live in vows, this is how we've talked, and you purify. They're the two amazing skills, to ensure that your actions of body, speech, and mind every second are really worthwhile, Rich and delicious seeds planted in our mind. So I think, let's go through now. I'm not even sure if it's in your course notes, but I should have put it in, but let's go through, how they've got the 10, there's this, when you start to look into Buddhism, and the first kind of piece of advice Buddha would give as a starting point, which becomes the basis of your future as you practice, is the very first, is to try to avoid doing at least these 10 actions. It's a little list of 10 don'ts. I don't know if it's in the course notes. I should have added it, but I often do it in the course notes we do in other classes, but I might send you an extra PDF, Tara or Lars, and you can give it to people after this class. I'll do that, and you can look into this. It's good to discuss. So there basically, I'll get these course notes. I'll just read out these things to you. It's a very simple presentation of these 4 actions and showing the 4 karmic results from these actions: the type of rebirth, the tendency, the experience, and the environmental. It's a very interesting analysis, but I have to find it. It's called the 10 non-virtues, and it's Buddha's first kind of advice. At least bare minimum, refrain from doing these 10 actions. Bare minimum, starting point for practice. Here we go. Let me just look. And I'll send you this as a separate document, I think, because it's not in the course notes, I don't think. So just listen to it now, and I'll send you this. So how we create a complete, it's called a complete, I've discussed this quite a few times. There's a type of karma where there'll be a complete action, and then there'll be one that's literally not complete. There are only some of these 4 things will be in place. So a complete action, this is more detail now. I'll go into more detail about this. How we create a complete non-virtuous action. And of course, you flip it over. It's exactly the same principle of how you create a complete virtuous action. So there are 4 things that need to be in place when you do an action for it to qualify as a complete action, which then it becomes what they call a throwing karma. It's the one that is triggered at the time of your death. That in our case, at the time we start to die in the past life, and we could have been an animal, The seed that was kind of triggered at that time for us was a complete non-killing karmic seed. As Rinpoche says, practiced no doubt in the context of living a spiritual path and in the context of having lived in vows of non-killing. So that seed was triggered, and even before we stopped breathing, we were already programmed to go to our present mother's human womb. So each of the 10 non-virtuous actions, 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the mind, has 4 components or factors. So for the action to be complete, that is to bring the full karmic result of a rebirth, okay? The one that causes you to get the actual birth, the first way your karma ripens, the type of birth you get, the type of body you get. That has to be a complete action. So I talk about this often, but I keep it very simple. So there's a bit more detail here. So the first is there has to be the object of the action. And here we're describing an action of killing. So the first of the 4 things has to be obviously a living being, like that mouse in the kitchen. So then, it's the first one. The second one, they call it here, and I'm going to change this, it's the mind involved in you doing that action. And actually there are 3 things in your mind that need to be there, minimum, for it to qualify as a complete action, in this case of non-killing, that'll cause you to have a suffering rebirth, like a dog or a spirit or something. So one is, there's a mental factor, a state of mind every second working, every single second. There's one that's called discrimination or recognition. Discrimination means every second you're discriminating between black and white and good and bad and round and square and here. Every millisecond your mind is this particular part of your mind called discrimination, and without this you'd be insane, is just constantly discriminating between this and that. So when you're a good mathematician, it's working like crazy. Being a virtuous person, you need this discrimination to watch your mind every second and discriminate between a positive thought and a negative thought. It's called discrimination. So here it's got to be that you will recognize that that is a mouse, that it's that mouse I'm going to kill. Second, you have to have the intention to kill. We use the word intention very, hang on a second, what's going on here? Something happened. Okay. Okay, so you need intention. It's me, and this is the real meaning of the word karma. Intention is not motivation. Here it means I will. It's bare bones, volition. I will. It's got no flavor. It's in the 3rd category of states of mind. It's the mechanics of the mind. It's not virtuous and it's not non-virtuous. And it's there every millisecond, driving everything we do. Of course, it's totally instinctive, so we don't notice. So here there has to be intention. I will kill that mouse. Third, in the second part of your mind involved in it, is the motivation. So clearly, if it's a mouse, it's probably got disgust, aversion, you can't stand mice, they're dirty. So it's aversion. It's not love, it's not kindness, it's not attachment because you want to eat mice meat for lunch. It's aversion. So you discriminate and recognize that as the mouse. You intend, I will kill that mouse, and the motivation is aversion. The second part, your mind involved. The third is the action. You do the action. You do the action. You do the deed. And then fourth, the completion of the action. And that's usually that the mouse will die, and they say technically to really qualify as a complete action, they need to die before you. These are quite technical points. This is like technical. It's not sort of blaming or moralistic. It's a technical thing about the way karma works. So 1 is the object, 2 is your mind involved in it, 3 is you do the action, 4, the result, a dead mouse. Exactly the same with a virtuous action of non-killing. One is the mouse. Two is your mind involved in it. Recognition, it's that mouse. I intend, I will not kill it. I will save it. Three, motivation, compassion. Three, you do the action. Four, a happy mouse, a live mouse. That's a complete action of non-killing. So now let's look at the 10 non-virtuous actions that Buddha would exhort us to attempt to use as the basis of, controlling our body and speech, so as not to sow seeds in our mind that will ripen as our future suffering. It's for our benefit. This is the point I always say, we miss this in the West. We think it sounds selfish, but you've got to first want to refrain from harming others because you don't want future suffering. This is fundamental. So the first of these, there are 3 of the body, okay? Buddha exhorts us not to kill, then not to take the ungiven. That's a Tibetan way of saying stealing. It's a very direct, isn't it? Don't take the ungiven. And the third of the body is what they call sexual misconduct. So there's many ways they interpret that, but the broad or general way would be, at least don't rape, don't misuse your body and harm others based on sexual attachment. But generally it's not cheat on your partner and not steal someone else's. Because look at look at the pain that causes. So these are the 3 actions of the body. And we do thousands of actions with our body, and we do lots of negative things with our body, but he's narrowing it down to the main ones and the heaviest ones. So a negative action isn't only when you harm others, but the heaviest negative action is when you harm others. It's much heavier than only harming yourself. So the 3 of the body exhorts us to not kill, not take the ungiven, and not, sexual misconduct, they call it. So let's look at the 4. So the 4 results, the first result, this is for each action. So clearly for the basis, there has to be a living being there. 2, the mind involved, you have to recognize that that's the mouse you're going to kill. You intend to kill, and you are motivated by anger or aversion. So there it is, Or for example, out of anger, killing an enemy or being that annoys you. Out of attachment, killing an animal for its meat. Out of ignorance, killing animals with the belief that they were placed on this earth to be used by humans for food. That's a very common belief. And I'm not criticizing. I know very devoted Christians who really believe, and I was taught this as a Catholic, that God made animals for the benefit of humans. That's a really powerful teaching. That's what some Christians feel. So they feel when you eat animals, you're almost like respecting God, because God gave you the animals for you to eat. It's an interesting view. I'm just telling you, Buddha doesn't have this view. Buddha would call that ignorance. So the motivation out of the 3 main delusions, angry motivation, attached motivation, and ignorant motivation. We can have any of those 3, can't we? So then you do the action, you carry out the killing, you use a weapon or you poison or something, or you ask someone else to do it for you. That makes it a complete action. And in fact, that's heavier because you're getting someone else to create karma as well. And the completion of the action is that the other person or the mouse die before you. So this is where they technically describe that suicide is not a complete action of killing. And it's a technical point. It's not a moralistic point, because the first one, the object, in this case, has to be another being. And then the 4th one, which is the completion, the being has to die before you, but you're killing yourself. It still is a negative action if the motivation is negative, but it's slightly technically different type of action. So the next one, taking the ungiven. The basis of this one would be the object would be something of value belonging to someone else. That's when you break it heavily. Then there's the mind involved. There'll be 3 things. 1, you recognize unmistakably that that is the object to be stolen, and you steal that object. 2 is the intention, you intend to steal. And 3, the motivation. For example, out of anger, stealing something from someone you wish to hurt. Out of attachment, stealing something you wish to possess. Out of ignorance, stealing or cheating, thinking that it's not wrong. That would be called ignorance, you know. Then you do the action. You take the object secretly, or you don't pay your taxes or your fees that you owe, or you misuse donations, or you get someone else to do it for you. So stealing, not paying your taxes is stealing. It's also lying, because you don't tell the truth. And that's a really difficult one for us. And then what happens is, our trouble is, we then just leave it like that. We just leave it, that's very foolish. We've really got to deal with it, not just leave it there, thinking, well, the credit cards don't care anyway. They might not, but that's not their problem. This is your problem. You have to clean it up. That's why it's so important, if you have debt, to deal with it somehow. Negotiate with the cards, tell them you're bankrupt, fine, but negotiate and clean it up. Otherwise, you're just constantly creating the karma to steal. And that brings incredible obstacles for yourself, because you don't receive what you need. You don't get the things you need, and people don't pay their bills to you. So we've got to be so moral with money, so honest, so ethical, so clean. Don't cheat. And that's because it's both called stealing and lying, The third one, sexual misconduct. So, for example, for a lay person, they talk about several things. For example, improper partner. If you've got a relationship with somebody, you're committed, and someone else has got another commitment to somebody else, then the object of this action would be that person. If you don't have a relationship with somebody and you have sex with other people, you're not creating sexual misconduct. You might be increasing your attachment, but that's not called sexual misconduct. You can sleep with who you like with. You're increasing your attachment, but it's not called sexual misconduct. And if you have a vow of sexual misconduct, you don't break a vow if you sleep around. Like I said, you're increasing attachment, but the vow or this commitment is only if you take someone else's partner, or if you cheat on your partner. So then the recognition, you must be in no doubt that the act is sexual misconduct. That's what we're talking here. And then second, intention, you intend to do it. And then, of course, motivated by, so for example, out of anger, you might rape someone else, out of attachment, you might cheat on somebody. Out of ignorance, committing adultery because you just think it's all right, So the action, well, this is what they say, literally the action of sexual misconduct is when organs meet sexually. So kissing somebody is not totally sexual misconduct. It's technically, they say, that's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, whatever, there may be many interpretations. So lying, the completion is when you've done it, the complete action. So lying, it says there are 4 conditions that need to be in place. So the first one for killing is an object. The second one for sexual misconduct also is an object. The third for stealing is an object, it's clear. But here, the object, the first one, there are many objects of lying, but most are included in the following 8. Denying something you have seen, heard, or experienced, or known, or falsely claiming to have seen something, or experienced something, or known something that you don't. So that's lying. So you say something that isn't true. You deny you've seen or heard or said that. So in other words, saying words that aren't true. And then, of course, so this is where it's interesting what the completion of the action. Here, the first is another person. It has to be the basis of lying, isn't just lying to yourself, isn't just speaking to the wind. There's got to be a person there who hears you and understands you. You can lie in French to somebody who doesn't speak French. It's not a complete action. The second is you must intend. You know that what you're saying, first you recognize what you're saying is not true. Second, you intend to lie. And third, your motivation, attachment, anger, whatever. Three, you do the action. You express it by speaking or writing or making a gesture with your hands or eyes or facial expressions. They even say here remaining silent. That is said to be a lie. That's interesting. I didn't think it was. In other words, you lead another person to believe something that isn't true. No, okay, there's a difference. Being silent is simply not saying anything. That doesn't mean that's a lie. We tend to think that in order not to lie, you've got to speak the truth. No. If someone says, oh, do you like Buddhists, and you don't want to talk about it, you don't say anything. That's not lying. But if you, by silence, you convey that something that's mistaken, that's then a lie. Can you see the difference? One is, let's say, you just don't say something. You don't say anything, but you're not trying to convey anything. You just don't speak a certain word. That's not lying. But if in a conversation, by your being silent, you convey something mistaken, that's when it becomes a lie. You have to see the difference. And your motivation, of course, is anger, attachment, whatever. And the completion of the action is that someone understands and believes you. Now, we know how cheap words are. We vomit out so many words. There's so much garbage written on the websites, and everybody believes everything they hear. So words are so shocking, That's why it's so important to watch our speech like a hawk, because we don't value speech at all. It's incredible, so degenerate, so much. So now the next one is called divisive speech, which means saying bad things about people when they're not there. It kind of creates incredible disharmony. You can see that in families, in organizations, in groups of people. So the object of this action is that two or more people so the object of the basis of this action, the object is two or more people who either have a good or a bad relationship. The intention is, you have an unmistaken recognition of these two people and that their relationship and feelings for each other. You then have an intention to cause division or disunity between them. And the motivation, of course, is attachment. For example, out of anger, creating disharmony among people you dislike. Out of attachment, speaking in a harsh or rude way to be accepted by a gang or something, or insulting the husband out of desire for the wife, or out of ignorance, causing disharmony, believing that it's good to do it, So it's very precise. I mean, we can see disharmony, how shocking it is. Just say words about somebody, people will believe you, The action you undertake to cause this disunity between people, or to prevent reconciliation among enemies by saying something that is either true or false, it doesn't matter. That the intention is to create division. That's what this one is. We see that we do this all the time, saying bad things about people behind their backs. Abusive speech. So the object of this is another person who could be hurt by the words. We can express insulting words to a non-human being or to an inanimate object, but the action is complete only when there's a person who understands and is hurt by our words. So that's the object of the action. Then there's the mind involved in it. You must recognize, clearly identify the person you want to insult. You intend to insult. And then the motivation. Now, the thing is with this intention, it sounds very clinical, but intention is so quick, we don't notice it most of the time. But literally, if there were not the thought, I will do it, you literally would not do it. So if we do it, it implies there was intention. But intention is so fast because we're so programmed with these habits, That's why we've got to watch our minds and our body and our speech like a hawk. So the motivation, either out of anger, insulting someone you dislike, or out of attachment, speaking in a harsh or rude way to be accepted by a gang. Again, oh, it's the same one, wrong one. Abuses. No, it's the same kind of thing. No, this is the wrong thing. I think we just put something. Oh, it's interesting. Same motivation. It's a bit peculiar here. Okay, so yeah, and the action, you do it, you say the words. And the result is that the other person understands the words and is hurt by your words. Now, so clearly we can see many people get hurt by our words, but we had no intention, and even the words were not even abusive, but the person's a bit sensitive. We know that, we know that. But you don't create negativity then, because the person's a bit paranoid and they're convinced that you abused them, but you didn't. That can happen. The next one, they call it idle gossip. What that means is words of just no substance, just rabbiting on meaninglessly about rubbish, So something the object is something meaningless or insignificant, which you treat as important. The intention. So this one, for lying, there has to be another person who believes you. But here it says another person doesn't need to hear your words. So idle talk is just your own self rabbiting on. So there has to be the recognition that you believe that what you wish to say is important or meaningful, although it's not. Intention, you must intend to express such words, and the motivation, of course, is the 3 poisons. So example, out of anger, chattering idly in order to disturb someone you dislike who is trying to meditate or do something virtuous. Out of attachment, indulging in gossip or frivolous talk about things you are attached to, or to spend time with someone you're attached to. Or out of ignorance, thinking there's nothing wrong with spending time gossiping. Well, I mean, that's mostly in our culture, is ignorance, We don't think speech matters. We say, oh, I can say what I like, because we don't have any concept of cause and effect when it comes to much of our behavior. We think, even I know in laws, you can steal $5 and you could get arrested, but you won't get arrested for shouting, you won't get arrested for chatting idly, you won't get arrested for lying. Well, it depends, because speech is not considered so heavy. We can say what we like, we think. But this view here is every thought we have, every word we say, every action we do sows seeds in the mind, produces future. And this is a way of kind of qualifying these actions. The next one, that's the 4 of the speech, 3 of the speech, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the mind. Now the last 3 are actually about the mind. And the way I like to say these, because they're called covetousness, malice or ill will, and called wrong views. So this sort of sounds peculiar, but I like to put it this way. But these 3 are like heavy levels of the 3 poisons. They're heavy levels of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, really extra heavy ones. So at least Buddha's exhorting us to try and at least attempt to control these heavy levels of the 3 poisons. So for example, you create in a major way this covetousness. You see, covetousness is not just attachment. It's really, really like, the pain of it is intense, really wanting another person's possession or their qualities or their partner. That's coveted, another person's objects, well, people or things that belong to a person. Really, that can be a very serious suffering for some people. Then the second part, your mind is involved in it. So the first, you recognize exactly that is the object that you covet, you crave for, like craving. And it's a very painful state of mind. I mean, it's very, very painful. Look at it. Like people who steal, it's very much based on this, I think, craving some other things. But this is not stealing, it's just in the mind. The second one is the intention to have that object or that. And then the motivation is, for example, out of anger, wanting to buy something before someone you dislike has a chance to buy it. that kind of mind, or wanting to deprive your enemy of his cherished possessions, or out of attachment, wanting to possess many things, thinking they will bring you happiness. I mean, that's covetousness. When you're really addicted to buying things, you're getting things all the time. Some people are. That's this extra level of attachment, always craving things, it's very painful, you can see. Out of ignorance, wanting to buy many things, thinking it's good for yourself, or it's or good for the economy, or it's a good habit. I mean, whatever. So now the action, the wish in the mind, as the action is in the mind, the wish to possess that object becomes very strong. That's the action of covetousness, because it's an action of the mind. The completion, deciding to find a way to make the object your own. So this motivation, the action itself, and this result are all kind of part of one train of thought. When they go into much detail like this, it's very technical. It really is quite surprising to us. We don't think of morality like this. But when they study in the monasteries, you study, there's incredible details about exactly what is ethics, what is not, how it functions, what's involved. It's really quite precise. And the more we understand our minds, the more we need to apply this precision, So the next one is malice or ill will. It's a heavy level of anger, really wanting someone to suffer. You can see this in the world. You can be angry, but you give it up, but some people cannot give it up and want the person to suffer. And that's often the reason that people harm others, because they've got so much violent anger. Not just violently, I don't just mean violently getting angry in a moment, but never giving it up in your mind and really wanting another person to suffer. So the first one, the object has to be another person that you want to harm. Second is that you recognize that is the person you want to harm. You have two is the intention, the wish to harm that person, and your motivation is out of anger, for example, you wish to harm someone who has harmed you or who you dislike. Out of attachment, wanting to kill your father to get your inheritance. That's common, So hungry for the money, out of anger, even killing somebody to get what you want, But we're talking the mind here, not the killing part, the mind. And out of ignorance, wishing to harm others because of thinking that violence is good or that you can do whatever you like, which is very common for much of our behavior. We think it doesn't matter. That's ignorance. The action, putting more effort into the wish to give harm so that it grows stronger. And the completion, you decide to act out your wish and do something harmful. But this is just the action of the mind that precedes the action, and that can be a complete action of the mind. Wrong views, they call it. I mean, this is really, we have the word in the West, fundamentalist. A person is a fundamentalist. We understand that. It's a very rigid, concrete, absolute view in relation to politics or religion, for example. We can see that with people. Very narrow, very fixed, very absolute. And you are absolutely convinced you are right, when in fact, your view is totally wrong. Totally not in sync with reality. So the basis of this action, something that exists or is true, for example, the law of cause. So it's got to be a concept. So here, let's say the concept of karma. That will be the basis of the action. Then there's the intention, the mind involved in it. You believe that your denial of, say, cause and effect is correct. You intend to deny that cause and effect. And the motivation is one. So, for example, anger because of hating someone who holds a view that is valid, you deny what they say and assert the opposite. Out of attachment, asserting some wrong view in order to get something you desire or to impress or gain favor from somebody. And out of ignorance, not understanding what is true and not true. So the action, thinking about carrying out the repudiation of the karma, for example, telling others what you think, and then the completion, definitely deciding to say, karma is not true. Wrong view, they call it. Basically, it's fundamentalism. See, it's not quite exact to say fundamentalism but it's convinced that you're right, even when you're wrong. That's the real one. So now that's the 10 non-virtues. And now each one of them, with those 4 conditions in place, would then sow a main seed in your bank vault that would ripen as a type of rebirth. A rebirth comes from an action that's complete, one of these 10. So now the next lot is looking at the results of a complete action. So a complete action is a type of rebirth, basically. Well, no, there are 4 different, it's a different way of putting it here. We've heard all this before, but I'll go through it. There are 4 different results of a complete karma, as we've talked very often. A type of rebirth, a tendency, an experience, and environmental. 4 ways, 4 results of a complete action. So, for example, so the fully ripened result is a type of rebirth. So in each of those 10, it would be one of the lower realms. So that's the same for each one, be one of the lower realms. And that's depending on the intensity of the action, the intensity of the motivation, the intensity of the habit, and even the way you do the action. So then the experience similar to the cause is going to be different every time. The tendency will be obvious. It's going to be the tendency to do that action. So what we're going to discuss here is the 2 specific results that are different every time, which is experiences similar to the cause and the environmental result. Because the fully ripened result is always a lower realm, and the tendency is always the tendency to do that action. So that's obvious. So the 2 that are different are the experience similar to the cause, which is how you're, treated by others. And the other one is the environmental result. So killing, the experience similar to the cause of killing, later in a human birth, you will have a short life or you'll get killed. Also, more than that, you'll have ill health and many troubles and no success in your activities. That can be the experience similar to the cause of killing. Now, the environmental result, which I've been talking about, like the food, the drink, the mortar, the crops are scarce, always inferior, low in nutrition, they are hard to digest, they cause disease, and most being also another environmental result of killing, your past killing, is that you're surrounded by people who die, like living in a war zone where people die all the time, that would be your environmental result of killing. Because they're the environment for you, aren't they? They mightn't be your family, just people around you. Now look at COVID. Look at COVID. It's environment. The environmental result of our past killing now all over the world. We're surrounded by people who are dying, sick, and just by touching them, you get sick and die too. That's environmental karma, And the whole world is experiencing it. That other humans are the physical world that by contact with them, we get sick, isn't it? Look at the whole world. Dying young is the experience similar to the cause. Not everybody who gets COVID dies, but we all get affected by it and get sick as a result. Look at the people. So the next one, stealing, the experience similar to the cause is obvious, lack of wealth or possessions and resources, but also you can never make ends meet. Some people are rich as anything, but they never have money at the right time. They can't make ends meet. Some people are really poor, but whatever they need, they always get it. That's because of not stealing. So stealing kind of blocks receiving, Or even, whatever you possess is all just common property. That's one of the results of stealing, Then the environmental result, you'll be born in a barren place where crops do not grow or are destroyed or have no power to remove hunger, or there are shortages of food or bitter frosts and hail and for example, there's not enough rain and then there's too much rain. There's always the imbalance of the elements, never getting what you need. Crops dry up, they die off, or business ventures fail. This is really common. That all is the environmental result of past stealing. And keep remembering, this is not punishment. No one's deciding this. It is an organic, natural law. Whatever we experience is the fruit of our past actions. I mean, the more you think about this, it's a really profound view. It's an outrageous view, you know. It's so kind of tasty. Everything, as Lama Zopa puts it, everything is our own karmic appearance, you know. So powerful. Sexual misconduct usually means cheating, you know, or different things actually. So the experience similar to the cause, and this would be the cheating one. The people who work around you are unreliable, or you find yourself having a lot of competition for your partner, or your relationships don't last. Some people, we can see it, not just their sexual relationships. People leave them, their sister stops talking to them, people at work don't like them, relationships end, you keep changing partners, they keep ending. This is because of having cheated on partners before, you know. But what's interesting, the environmental result is more to do, I think, with kind of the energy of the attachment in the mind. It's more subtle. The environmental result, where you live, is filthy, and there's urine and feces everywhere, and mud and dirt and filthy, and everything stinks, and everywhere seems unpleasant and distasteful. We know there are places like that. Even some people living in a nice suburb, their house is like that. It's very real direct karma of sexual misconduct. Mainly, I think, it's to do with the attachment in the mind. It's very intense. Attachment, sexual attachment is very suffering. You can see what it does to the mind, you know. I mean, in other words, sexual attachment meaning thinking about objects or thinking about the object all the time. Like attachment to food is not necessarily you follow it, but in the mind is always there, always thinking about food, always think, or if you always want to steal things, always thinking about stealing, or if you're attached to having sex, always thinking about the girl or the boy, always thinking about it, always wanting it. So we can see it's the suffering of attachment. It's very painful. We're the recipients of the pain. So this is particular sexual misconduct, not just sexual activity. Sexual activity itself doesn't bring these results. Maybe if you, the last one, the environmental result, I think, is when if the physical world is filthy and stinky and smelly, that seems to be uncontrolled attachment, you know. I mean, if you control it, then you're not creating negative karma, you know. You suffer, but you don't harm others and you don't harm yourself so much. Lying, the experience similar to the cause, is really obvious. No one believes you, even if you're telling the truth. Or people are always deceiving you. That's the past, from fruit of past lying. And the environmental result, your work in cooperation with others fails to prosper, and people don't work well together, and everyone generally is cheating one another and is afraid. And there are many things to be afraid of. That's the environmental result of lying. It's very interesting, isn't it? Divisive speech, the experience similar to the cause, is very interesting. You know, talking bad things behind backs. You will be lonely. You will easily lose friends. People around you are always fighting one another. People around you have an undesirable character. Like living in a war zone. Enemies everywhere. Paranoid. Convinced people don't like you. Imagine people trying to cause you harm, you know. That's divisive, from divisive speech. Abusive speech, the experience similar to the cause, you'll always be hearing distressing words. In other words, you live in a very violent place where there's lots of anger and shouting. Others will abuse you. And even when you speak nicely, they will interpret it negatively. I have that one. Many people think I'm abusive when I'm not really being. I mean, I shout, I suppose. Shouting doesn't help. So the environmental result of abusive speech is interesting. There's two different interpretations. You know, one here is that you live in a place where there are many kind of everything is ugly and broken and sharp rocks and thorns. But Lama Zopa says you will live in a desert. Nothing can grow from abusive speech, you know. You see that when you hear like karma like this, it's everything, it really shows that it's so subtle that everything any living being ever does or says or thinks produces the outside world. That's a pretty intense concept, you've got to admit. It really needs thinking about. So this is the point. Karma's taught at the very beginning of the path, mainly just as instructions. You know, mummy says, don't do this. You're not supposed to understand it because it's too subtle. Finally, knowing the intricacies of the truth of all of this, you've got to be practically a Buddha, you know, it's so subtle. So it's really it's implying a very subtle view. It's very fascinating. I find it fascinating. Idle gossip, just rabbiting on, okay? The experience similar to the cause. This is really obvious. Your experience as a result of this action. These results aren't happening now. If this results happen now, it's from past lives, you know? The experience similar to the cause of rabbiting on about nothing is obvious. Nobody will pay any attention to your speech. Your words will be meaningless to people. They will have no value. Have no interest in listening to you. And we know that one. It's very painful. When you know, like in a meeting or something, and no one pays attention. This is often typically the girl-boy thing, you know, a bunch of boys together and there's a girl there. You don't even get heard, you know. We know that's still the karma. We know like it's like that, you know. That I think is one of the karmas of being female. Maybe this world's different now. Things are changing, but typically, you know, like in typical countries where women are like chattels, I mean, your words are useless. No one would listen to you. No one would even ask you an opinion. We know that. It's very true in some countries. And in our country, it's like that, but we're changing. It's changing, isn't it? Your speech has no value. An environmental result, well, fruits don't grow, or they grow at the wrong times, or they seem ripe when they're not, or they have frail roots and no leisure places like parks and glades and pools or of cool water, and many things to make you afraid. Seems like fear, people paranoid comes from speech. It's interesting. So then the last three ones of the mind, it's time to finish. So I think I'll leave it. I didn't get you to ask a single question. I am so sorry. So maybe have some questions. Come on. We have to do the three next week. Any questions, people?
Let's see. We did have one earlier from Terry.
Okay,
but it's
good.
from, do you want to ask Terry?
Just read it out, please.
Okay. How do you know if one gets hurt by words?
What, darling?
How do you know if one gets hurt by words?
Well, you have to know your mind, Terry. You know, you have to know your own mind, darling. To be aware of what you think. That's how you know. But someone else's hurt, that's different. It's hard. What else then?
Okay. And her next question, it's not as clear. We have Mark here. Go ahead, Mark.
Go, Mark. Yeah.
Hello, Venerable Rabina. In the readings, and I've heard this taught before, it said that karma is expandable, that you create a karmic seed and you don't do anything about it. It just gets the suffering that you're going to experience gets more and more and more heavy. But I've never understood exactly the technical reason for that as to why that would be.
Well, I mean, I don't know about botany, but does not one seed finally bring many fruits in botany? Does it? I'm asking. Do people know?
It does.
Well, there you go. Same like that's what the analogy. It's almost the energy. It's so I don't know. I think it makes sense. Listen to me. Just think of good things or bad things. I mean, if you start playing the piano, you're stowing this system and you're developing a habit in your mind. And as you keep doing it, it gets more and more powerful, more and more powerful, more and more powerful. It has to expand and grow. Energy doesn't stay static. Knowledge grows. Everything grows. You know, it's just the nature of the universe. I think I've got a feeling. Do you see my point?
Yes, and that's how I was trying to explain it to myself. So if I kill a mosquito and that's the only thing I ever kill, I can't see how that gets heavier and heavier and heavier. But if I kill a mosquito and then that gets to become a habit, then yes, that totally makes sense.
I know exactly, but I mean, still, no, I understand. But again, that's sort of a bit like saying if you sow one rose seed, it doesn't seem right that it should produce more roses, even though you don't grow any other seeds. It's not a moralistic issue. It's not a moralistic thing. And the thing is, if you did just, you see, my point is, if you were a person who never killed anything and you did kill, you'd fix it quickly anyway. So it's sort of not logical to isolate one action and then say everything else is not that. I mean, you wouldn't just by accident sow one rose seed and never another seed in your whole life. So it's like it's a more dependent arising type thing. Do you see my point? And
I think so.
It's not moralistic, you know, it's just, it's a technical point. That if seeds multiply, then their fruits, I mean, I don't know enough about botany. I know, it just needs to think about it. We've got to keep remembering it was a natural law. What's the logic of it? It's not moralistic. That's the key thing to keep remembering. It's not a question of being fair or unfair, which is how we tend to hear it.
Right.
That's a big thing behind it, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
It's not like that. So let's leave it there and try and think, what does it mean, you know?
Okay, I'll do that.
It's important, yeah. Thank you so much. It's a really good point.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. What else, darling people?
Freddie?
Yeah, Freddie, talk to me.
Hi, Venerable.
Hello,
my question is, what if you live with someone or your spouse is putting out these non-virtuous actions and you are living in that environment? Let's say the person steals something and it's being used in the home.
I know it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult, isn't it? We've got some decisions to make. It's quite difficult because it doesn't mean you want to, you know, it's quite difficult because this is often what happens. Things get very complicated, you know.
Does that bring bad karma though?
I think it's up to you to really, like, you know, maybe you don't want to cause harm to your husband. Let's say you don't want to cause fights, but maybe you try not to use it or something. I mean, it's quite difficult because if you know that your husband is stealing money from the government and you get the benefit, I mean, it's difficult is what I'm saying. But then the major one is if you can't stop it, at least mentally, you do not want to be part of it. Mentally, you do not want to buy into it. That's really important. And you do as much as you can to not be involved in it.
Okay.
It's not that easy. I can see it would not be easy necessarily.
Thank you, Robina. Thank you.
It's clear that in your mind, you must be very clear about how you feel about it and not want to be part of it, you know. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, darling. What else?
Thank you.
Good, Freddie.
Elena?
Yes, Elena, darling.
Hello, Venerable.
Hello, sweetheart.
What about if you do consciously a bad action with your voice? Let's say you're lying, but not because for your own benefit, you want to protect somebody else, because maybe the other person is a worrying person, or it's not the right time for the other person. So when your motivation...
I understand, darling. So there's levels and levels of these vows and commitments. So at the level, this is not a vow here. This is just wise advice, like advice from the doctor. Do you understand? So it's like, obviously everything we do is already affected by the motivation. So straight away, a lie to deceive somebody, but a lie to help somebody, they're still lies, but it's much less severe. So technically there might be some slight negativity, but by the time you get to the bodhisattva path, if your motivation is really pure, you don't create any negativity, but the motivation, it's got to be very conscious. It's going to be a very conscious motivation. And not just to try, often we just say, oh, don't want to tell them because I don't want to upset them. Often it's because we're protecting ourselves. It's got to be super clear about the motivation. Then, I mean, on the bodhisattva level, it's a totally virtuous action. Of course it is, because you're supporting somebody. You've got to be clear about it. We don't, not to trick yourself, you know, be very honest, very sincere about the motivation and what it is. Because often we think I don't want to upset somebody, but it's really because we're afraid of them not liking us or something. But often too, we tend to think we've got to blurt out everything. We can keep things silent, you know. And if you really want to be wise with your speech and you don't want to speak the truth because the person worries, then you can be skillful how you put it. We can be very wise with words, you know. Because if motivation is pure, that's nothing wrong, darling.
Yeah, I also wonder if I do it then out of compassion, or if I do it because of my own attachment, because I don't want to see the other person suffering.
That's often it can be that. We can be very tricky with ourselves.
Yeah.
So the point is, none of this, like with Mark's question, none of it is moralistic. It's like learning botany so you can grow a better plant. You've got to know the technicalities of it. And the more precise we can know our mind, the more clear we can be, the more likely we can produce the best fruits ourselves. Do you understand?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, Wolfgang.
Venerable Rubina, I'm struggling with the good and bad karma. What is good? What is bad? Is winning $1 million good? Is getting killed young and going to Amitabha Pure Land bad? So
you see, I understand your point exactly. I understand exactly your point. In general, any action, in general, Wolfgang, any action that looks like suffering, such as getting killed, would be the result of killing. You wouldn't get killed young if you hadn't killed. But because you're a practitioner, and you then go to Amitabha's Pure Land, that negative action did ripen of yours, but it brought a marvelous result. So there's no contradiction. You would not have died young if you hadn't killed in the past, but because you're a practitioner, then because of your practice, you went to Amitabha's Pure Land, which is a result of another karma. You get my point?
yes, but I see really an emptiness behind it.
Well, of course there is, depending on horizon, darling. Of course it is. But the point is here, this discussion of what is negative, what is positive, it's like super precise, like as if it's botany, precise exactly what is the cause of that plant. Now, you know, if you're a wise botanist, you could have a poison plant there because you know how to use it. I mean, that's getting complicated. Let me go back to what I said before. By definition, every millisecond of whatever happens has a cause. By definition, whatever is like a suffering is the fruit of a negative action. But because, like I said, of your practice, I mean, bodhisattvas can have bad things happen, but they almost like they are happy that it happens because they're able to utilize it and transform it. And then for them too, it's using up your negative karma. So there's, of course, it's more nuanced as you get more advanced, but still, technically speaking, you wouldn't die young if you hadn't killed in the 47 million lives ago. And then because of your practice, though, now it turned out to be a good thing. That's not a contradiction. It's just more subtle. It's not as if actions are individual. Everything is so interdependent, you know.
Yes, I understand you completely, because I can see the same. Maybe even happening something bad to you is the best that can happen to you.
That's even we can see that in hindsight, can't we? So many times by you know, I always think about my own example. I was doing kung fu, totally committed to being my karate was my career before I met the Buddhists. When I was 33 or something, I was 32, and I was completely convinced that karate was my career. I was totally committed. And then a car ran over my foot and stopped me in my tracks. I was devastated. But then because of that, you know, I met Lama Yeshe. So then that's where we can really have wisdom in our lives. We can be grateful for the bad things that happen. That's the point. Exactly.
Yeah. What a wonderful example.
A bad thing could be a catalyst for a good thing. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Well, darling people, it's time to go. I'm so sorry I talked so much today. I didn't stop. It's 22.
Yeah.
I think
it was lovely.
But I'm happy. So we'll continue next week. I'll finish the last 3 and then we'll talk about whatever we've got to talk about. How many more days have we got for karma?
2.
Okay, lots to talk about. We'll go into much more detail about purification again. We'll do all that, okay?
Okay,
darlings.
dedication.
So much, yes. Just thinking here, I'll say I'll just say the English. So we think due as a result of these karmic seeds that we have dropped into our bank vaults. Of course, Buddha does not talk about bank vaults, but I say that. Every second we've been thinking and talking, we've sown all these seeds. So we delight in all these seeds we planted. So as a result of these seeds, may they ripen exactly as we motivated in my becoming a Buddha. And therefore, we're able to lead all suffering sentient beings, just like we motivated. That's what dedication is, you know. So how marvelous, think like that. Then, next, last, Tara, somebody. So now we think
may this precious, amazing, over-the-top, ridiculous aspiration called bodhicitta, which is this aspiration to never give up helping others and to never give up making yourself become a Buddha, so then you're totally qualified. May this amazing aspiration, not yet arisen in the minds of others, may it arise. And if it has arisen in the minds of others, may it never decline, but increase more and more. Okay, that's it, people. Thank you, darling ones. I'm in Jamyan right now, and they're talking about how they do, like, I think 8 or more classes for discovering Buddhism. So maybe we're just doing a whizzing through 4 classes each, and then we'll get an imprint, and who knows? Who knows? Okay,
Yes.
really good. I'm happy. But there seems to be some energy around it. It's wonderful. I'm very pleased.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Yuval. I accept your kata. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Much love, everyone. Bye.
You. Bye.